Every one of us can be guilty of something we did, big or small. Feeling guilty and sorry is one of the prime feelings that we feel. We cannot stop or conceal. But today, we are going to see a list of killers who do not show a drop of remorse for the biggest mistakes a human can ever commit. Every human tends to feel guilty for even the slightest wrong they do. But here is TJ Lane, a killer who not only shows no remorse, but shows his antagonistic personality by flipping them off. During his trial, he casually sits down with his attorney and deliberately unbuttons his shirt, eventually revealing his t-shirt underneath that says killer. TJ Lane was not like any other sophomore. He had a dark and vindictive side that he manifested during the early years of school. He was a school shooter who managed to injure 3 students and shot the other 3 dead brutally. One could only help the needy TJ Lane, a killer who showed no feelings or repentance. There wasn't anything his attorney could do. We can see the attorney's response to TJ's actions. Up next, Randall Moore, a killer who is no ordinary. Everyone in the room was dumbfounded, including the judge. He states that he represented the epitome of pure malevolence, and also openly remarked that never had he ever come across anyone like Randall. Randall was not just a killer. This man kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and fatally killed his own wife. He was exceptionally feral, that he harmed a police officer who tried to stop him. His adversary attorney persisted. The prospect of being punished itself is profoundly daunting. When the judge pronounced him guilty of first-degree murder, his response to that was freakishly odd. His only reaction to that was a slight nod, which seemed utterly abnormal from someone in that position.
Randall Moore stood as the verdicts against him were read.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree.
His only reaction? A slight nod.
He admits that he shows no penitence, additionally blames his wife for taking his son away from him. The idea of his son living with him does not sound very safe, does it? The duty of cops is to protect and aid the citizens who knew the world needed someone to guard and uphold the law of enforcement as well.
And we got justice today. And Treesan was with us today, and she knows that no other woman and no child will ever be hurt by this man again.
Yet another chilling story of a killer, Luis Bracamontes, who set his target exclusively on the police force. This cop killer also reacted in a strange way. He could not stop smiling in the courtroom. He was charged for ruthlessly killing 2 cops, Danny Oliver and Michael Davis Jr., and admits that he still whims to kill more. He concedes what he did, and frankly asserts that his time in court is an absolute waste of time, and that this trail is unnecessary. He went as far as to call one of his victims a coward. His manners during his trial becomes increasingly unsettling. When the details of his murders were presented in the courtroom, his reaction was to chuckle in that situation. During the trial, he pleads with the judge for a death penalty and says he wanted the execution.
And we do want to point out that today's verdict was reached after only 4 hours of deliberation. A judge is now scheduled to formally sentence Bracamontes on April 25th.
So far, the killers were all young teenagers or middle-aged adults. But here's John Spooner, a 76-year-old killer who shows no contrition. He claims that he shot an unarmed teenager to death, alleging that the boy attempted to rob him. The surveillance camera recorded the moments when John took a shot at Darius Simons on the sidewalk.
The Milwaukee man seen in this surveillance video shooting and killing his teenage neighbor will spend the rest of his life in prison with no chance of parole.
During the trial, John Spooner decides to accuse the boy's bereaved mother, adding to the list another teenage killer, Michael Swanson, a 17-year-old culprit in 2 deaths. Young and fearless should be one of the mottos in life, but this is beyond ludicrousy. This young boy has his hands stained with the blood of 2 cold-blooded murder, but does not show even a trace of regret, not even when the victim's family spoke to him in the courtroom. When the judge reads his sentence, he decides to laugh and chuckle. He was charged for murdering 2 convenience store workers. He spent his years in the cell, but hasn't seemed like he learnt a lesson after all. At 21, he killed one of his cell inmates with a knife he illicitly possessed, which adds an additional 25 years to his sentence.
As he left the courtroom, Swanson smiled once again. Meyer's daughter said it was still hard to see.
The next criminal on the list, Danta Wright, yet another killer who decided to laugh during his sentencing. This didn't sit well with everyone in the courtroom, including the judge. His way of act caused the judge to halt the sentencing. What's really bizarre is that he still continued to laugh and smile at the camera, even while the victim's mother gushed tears while talking about her son who was shot dead by Danta Wright. Another killer who follows the same pattern, Tyrell Webster, a murderer, smiled, sneered, and did not express an ounce of remorse or regret. The victim's sister, who was visually challenged, showed up to court during his trial. Jody Loberson asked where the victim stood to face towards and speak. Even though it was her brother who was killed by Danta Wright, she was considerate enough to be kind kind to him by saying that she forgives him and also mentions that she keeps him in her prayers. But as soon as she was informed that he was mockingly laughing at that, she took the plunge. She expresses her anger by saying that his laugh is not going to last long when he was going to spend the rest of his time in between four walls being inside the cell. And that is when the laugh on his face turns into tears wetting his cheeks. I suppose he did realize that sooner or later. Moving on, the next manslayer, Teddy Baltimore Smith. Well, he kind of defies the pattern. He does not smirk at the camera or the victim's family, although he blames them. He tries to persuade everyone, including the judge, into believing him by saying that he was provoked by the victim. The killer showed no regrets for his actions and still believed he did the right thing. During his sentencing, Smith spent a solid 15 minutes going through the crime he committed over and over again to prove that it was not his fault at all. But what really happened? Why was Smith so provoked by the victim that he decided to kill him? Smith says that the victim spit on his black BMW. Spitting, of course, is not considered the best of manners, but it does not deserve a death penalty. According to Smith, he was on the right and was stubborn enough to not admit his feral mistake. Shoot him. The victim's sisters could not stand another moment listening to Smith describing the crime multiple times, and they decided to leave the courtroom.
Eventually, the victim's sister stopped listening and walked away. Earlier, the prosecutor read a statement she had written for the judge.
Next up in our list is Ronnie O'Neill. He has committed something absolutely feral, that even the judge was flabbergasted. The judge asserts in the courtroom that she has come across various cases like shootings, stabbings, and every gore of humans possibly getting killed. But Ronnie stood out being the epitome of carnage. When Ronnie was asked if he was sorry for what he did, he shakes his head, saying he is not sorry for things that he did not do, and to the things that he did do. During one of his trials, he decides to present himself openly and admit that he did kill his wife and daughter clearly and loudly in front of everyone present in the courtroom. The victim's family showed their anger while he did not react to it. It came to a point that his son has to testify against Ronnie. He was cross-examined by no one but his own father, Ronnie. The valiant boy answered that Ronnie indeed tried to stab him that night he killed his mum and sister. It has come to note that this kid had been adopted by a family of 5 siblings, and he now lives a happy life being brought up by good parents. This made me regain my confidence in people's compassion. So far, the list has entirely been about killers who are all men. Does it mean there is not even a sole woman? Well, your question is being answered by this upcoming case of Isabel Martinez, a wife and a mother of 4. She was charged with murdering her husband and 4 children and had planned to represent herself. The most abnormal part besides the murders was her showing her thumbs up when he faces the judge for the first time. She kept smiling throughout the trial and showed zero remorse. Well, this case can be considered as a severe case of mental illness, considering how absurd the reason behind her killing is. She says that she lost her father 2 weeks earlier and wanted him back, and the only way was to exchange by trading lives. She admits she offered their lives to the Lord. What are your thoughts on this? Why do you think most of the killers mirror the same pattern? Let us know in the comments. And if you found all these stories disturbing yet interesting, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell for more spine-chilling stories.